All right, so we heard from a number of folks this week, and number one is Eric Turner from Asheville, North Carolina. You guys ever been to Asheville?
I don't think so.
Never been up into the hills there. Here it's nice.
So beautiful. I'm blessed. I get to travel a lot for my job, and Asheville is one of the places I could really see myself living. It is absolutely beautiful in the mountains of North Carolina, temperate climate, beautiful scenery, lovely place.
I hear there are a lot of creative people living out there. Right?
Yes, and it's a booming, and it's also a hotbed of brewing. A couple big breweries have facilities there.
Yeah, hipster haven, I imagine.
Oh, I can't wait. I'm ready. Eric writes, I own a 120-year-old farmhouse in farm country outside of Asheville, North Carolina that has had a few additions over the years. The oldest areas of the house do not have any insulation in the walls at all. You can feel the wind across the entire front of the house. We're removing the original beat-up beadboard and putting up nickel gap shiplap in its place. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to insulate. The walls are true 2x4 studs, full inches thick. The exterior sheathing, he puts in quotes sheathing, is the original board and batten running vertically, approximately 10 inches wide with 1-inch thick boards with a significant gap between each of them. Then there are layers of asphalt siding followed by aluminum siding. Question 1. Even though the gaps between the boards are covered by wood strips on the exterior, should I fill those gaps with an expanding foam like Great Stuff? I suspect the gaps are where most of the wind is getting through. All right, so we take that first one.
So from the photo, it looks like he's already gotten started on that.
He did. He says, and I don't know if it was in this email or a subsequent one, that he started doing this and then wondered if it was a good idea.
Now, I don't think it's a bad idea necessarily. I mean, the fact that there are battens on the other side is helpful. Don't know if the Great Stuff foam is the perfect material for the job, because the one thing is with those he's got basically big wide planks on the whole front of his house.
And in the summer, those boards are going to swell in this climate.
And that's one of the biggest concerns with using that sort of material as air sealing, is that if there's a lot of movement in the wood, that it could eventually open up.
Yeah, will it actually seal it long term?
So I know some of the foams that are out now are claimed to be stickier and stretchier. I don't really know a whole lot about it, but you might consider a flexible caulk, but that's an awful lot of cracks to be caulking.
You could also use an air sealing tape, but that's very expensive.
Do you know, is there any product still around? I know Owens Corning had a while back some sort of spray air sealing thing that was made mostly for people who are doing the sort of flash and bat that didn't want to add spray foam.
Yeah, so Owens Corning and Knauf both have like liquid caulking systems meant to be used with fiberglass bats, and I think that's a pretty good suggestion. I would also want to try, Dow has been making a foam product for airtight drywall approach. It's meant to go on the face of the studs. You let it harden, and then when you put the panels on, it creates this gasket. And the idea with this stuff is it's meant to be more elastic than most spray foams. So that might be a good application for this, but that's kind of an off-label recommendation. I don't know what Dow would say about that.
Now, I was poking around on Green Building Advisors forum and found somebody talking about insulating an old house that didn't have sheathing, sort of similar situation, a leaky exterior wall, and they were tearing off the interior, similar to this. And, a lot of people actually recommended dense pack cellulose. And now if he's putting board paneling on the inside, you'd think, oh, well, then he's got to drill some holes in the boards. But what a lot of people recommend, and what you see a lot in Europe, is interior air barriers. Whether you do it out of something like OSB and
but what about wetting
seams
from the gaps in the boards, soaking that cellulose?
To tell you the truth, as long as the flashing details were good on the outside, nobody seemed to be that worried about it. And we're talking about some of the top people that seem to respond to those questions.
Well, those top people I got an issue with because this house has board and batten siding, which means there's no lapping to stop water, to control water, right? And especially at the tops of windows, my guess is that these boards are rotten.
Yeah.
Except that he's got like other layers of siding over the board and batten, so sounds like.
I think that's going to be an interesting component of this particular stack up.
Yeah.
So he's got this asphalt siding. And once again, where I grew up, this was a kind of a popular thing.
Sometimes
it's like a
fiberboard
with asphalt layer and then like granules like that would be on roofing shingles, right? And they either meant to look like stone or brick. It's never convincing.
Yeah.
It looks like Insul brick. And then they have aluminum siding on this thing, which is water shedding, right?
Sure. So I mean, obviously, you want to be sure that you have some flashing details in place if you're going to have cellulose inside your walls. But regardless of what insulation they use in the walls, an interior air barrier might not be a bad idea.
Under his nickel gap paneling.
Yeah, there's one product that some people are recommending. There's that company, I think based in Brooklyn, 475, that provides a lot of air sealing materials, a lot of building science, high performance building materials. And there's this material called Intello Plus, which it's basically a fabric of some sort, almost like a house wrap, but that they use for interior air barriers and as a substrate to blow cellulose insulation through. So that's something to consider. Because, a lot of people put up, like you see those old cathedral ceilings that people do in cabins where they do the boards and they just skip the drywall altogether.
Bad idea.
And they've got no air barrier, and then in the winter it basically rains from
yes, because the warm,
ceilings.
Moist air from the inside is condensing up on the sheathing or the framing members up in the ceiling and then dripping down.
Yeah, so I mean, if he's got leaky exterior wall surfaces, putting just the nickel gapped boards on the inside is certainly not going to be a good enough air barrier.
I'm going to make another suggestion here, too. And I don't think the foam is necessarily a bad idea. I agree with Rob that expansion and contraction over time could make it fail. But on the interior of the board sheathing, I think I would put a layer of 30-pound felt stapled to the sides of the studs and the bottom plate and the top plate to kind of make a, what would that be, a 5-sided box. And that would keep the water from coming into the insulation cavity. It's going to help with the air barrier consideration. And then, I think it's a bad practice to put board siding on the interior of a heated or conditioned space.
As the only surface.
I think we need something. Rob suggests one of these air barriers. Or European air barrier, we call them generically.
Yep. I think they're made in Germany. But, a lot of times, I know that some of the folks at the Passive Housing Institute US did a bunch of houses where I think they literally just did OSB taped.
Yep, I think that would work great.
Yep.
Thermoply is another option, which is a very thin cardboard material with kind of a shiny surface. That's meant to be an air barrier. That's commonly used behind shower units and that kind of stuff. That's inexpensive, but any of these things you have to tape and detail so that air is not getting from the inside to the outside, I think is the key.
Yeah.
Yep.
What would you do?
I'd take the siding off and I'd put rigid foam on the outside. And I'd tape all those seams.
Yeah. I asked Eric in a subsequent email if he was planning to reside in the near future or ever, and that would definitely, I didn't hear back from him, that would definitely affect what I would tell him to do.
Yeah, and also just knowing how big of a part of this house we're talking about. I mean, if it's a small wing of the house, the extra labor involved in tearing that board off and putting it back on or putting something else back on might just be worth it.
His next question, how should I fill the wall cavity? Since insulation in the big box doors are made for either 2x4 or 2x6 dimensional lumber and mine are in between, should I go with foam, 1/2 inches of foam followed by standard 2x4 insulation, or should I just use 2x6 insulation or just 2x4? I would say use 2x6 insulation. You're not going to get the R21 R value that's on the package, but a chart I looked at, and that'll be on the podcast page for this episode. I think you get a R19 or R16 with an R21 bat and a 4-inch cavity.
Yeah, you're going to lose. I mean, if you're only compressing something about an inch like that, you're going to lose maybe a couple of R value. But like you said, it's better. If you put too thin a layer in there, you're not going to have the stated R value of that either, and it's going to perform much worse. So there's no harm in compressing fiberglass bats.
To a point, right? You don't want it to affect how your drywall goes on or what have you, right?
Sure.
It needs to be a reasonable amount. But yeah, 2x6 and a 4-inch cavity, not a problem at all. He asked, are there any moisture airflow issues that I should look out for when insulating a wall this old? Yeah, you got to keep the water out, and you got to have an air barrier on one side or the other, and both is best. So Eric, let us know how things go there. I hope you're enjoying your home in Asheville. Maybe we'll be neighbors someday.